fallout over the Parkland shooting continues, and the fallout from the media continues. So we've been told this story, which is that all the Parkland survivors have innate moral authority and can speak on any issue without any criticism. Now, I have said over and over and over on this program, listen to every episode since Parkland, I've said these kids have a right to speak out. Of course they have a right to speak out. This is America. When I was 17 years old, I had a syndicated columnist. But this comes with a caveat. The caveat is you will get criticized. People will criticize you. People will pick apart what you are saying publicly, especially when you're the type of person who goes on national television and suggests that all those who disagree with you are actually akin to child murderers. If you do that, it turns out people get pissed off. Okay, but the media have decided that any criticism of these kids whatsoever, not their right to speak, not their expertise, right? If you criticize the stuff they are saying, if you say what they are saying is wrong, or if you say, I don't think that they are conducting themselves properly publicly, or if you say that sort of stuff, then you are a hater. Then you are brutal. Then you are doing something terrible. Okay, I don't understand why this should be the case. Really, in public life, everyone gets criticized. It's part of the way this works. And when you're speaking on issues of deep public importance, fundamental issues to American liberty and, frankly, human liberty, like should you have the right to keep and bear arms, then passions are going to run high. And not only are passions going to run high, people have not only every right, but every responsibility to speak out against perspectives that they think are bad. And I think a lot of what these kids have been saying is wrong, non-factual. I think some of what they've been saying is immoral when they suggest that Marco Rubio is akin to the shooter in Parkland. And when they say that Dana Lash is a murderer with blood on her hands, this stuff is disgusting. And not only do I have every right, I have every moral obligation to speak up against it because it's gross. Okay, but that's not how the media have treated this. So CNN tweeted this out about David Hogg. David Hogg is, of course, the guy who's probably become the most famous of these Parkland survivors. Emma Gonzalez is the other one who's really gained a lot of credibility. She's very good at media. Emma Gonzalez, I think, really knows how to handle herself. David Hogg, not so much. He thinks that the sort of Che Guevara attitude, the fist in the air thing that you're seeing here, is what's going to win the day, that anger wins the day. Emma Gonzalez understands that anger doesn't win the day. She's much better at this than David Hogg, just from a purely political point of view. If you're going to pick one of those two people to run for office, there's no doubt in my mind you run Emma Gonzalez, not David Hogg. In any case, the media have decided that David Hogg's voice is deeply important and that he should be booked on every show. So he's been on CNN 1,000 times at this point. And this is what CNN tweeted out yesterday, quote, a brief history of how Parkland survivor David Hogg keeps schooling lawmakers on social media. Yeah, that sounds like objective journalism to me. Okay, we here at the Daily Wire, we're not objective. So when we say that somebody is schooling somebody else, you can assume that we're conservative. And we're saying that a conservative is schooling a leftist. Why? Because we are a conservative website and we make that obvious and known. But CNN is supposed to be objective. Does that sound like an objective headline to you? A brief history of how Parkland survivor David Hogg keeps schooling lawmakers on social media? Of course not. Well, the big controversy that's broken out over David Hogg in the last 24 hours concerns Laura Ingraham. So Laura retweeted a piece that was on our website. The piece that was on our website about David Hogg being rejected by certain colleges originally appeared at TMZ. So the story did not originate with us. And it really only originated with David Hogg because he was interviewed by TMZ somewhere and he started discussing which colleges he had gotten into. So we begin with what David Hogg actually said about not getting into colleges. And there are a couple ways of reading this, and I want to be fair to him. So here's what the clip said.
It's not been too great for me and some of the other members of the movement, like Ryan Deitch. We got rejected from we got rejected from UCLA, and I got rejected from UCLA and UCSD. So it's been kind of annoying having to deal with that and everything else that's been going on. But at this point, we're changing the world. We're too busy. Right now, it's too hard to focus on that. It is absolutely disappointing. But at this point, we're already changing the world. If colleges want to support us in that, great. If they don't, doesn't matter. We're still going to change the world.
So his comments here could have been read in a couple of different ways. The part that you see the slash through, the part where that's cut out there, is where David Hogg says, listen, a lot of people don't actually get into colleges, right? It's not super unpredictable. A lot of people in my class didn't get into a lot of colleges. There are a lot of people who can't afford to go to college. All of that is true. And for the first 2/3 of this comment, I'm actually in agreement David Hogg is handling this with class. That last comment there where he says that if colleges want to help us in our crusade, great. If not, then we're still changing the world. This is where I have a bit of trouble because the implication is where he is, and listen, he's speaking off the cuff, so maybe it's just a mistake. But the implication of what he's saying is the reason that colleges are not letting him in is not because he wasn't qualified. They're not letting him in because of his activism, which of course would be incredibly silly. Right? There is no question that the top leaders of this movement will end up going to fantastic graduate schools, specifically because they are top leaders of this movement. Right? Political activism on the left is not going to come back and bite you. Right? It's the ultimate extracurricular activity for most college administrators. My guess is that if he had sent in his applications right now, as opposed to 6 months ago, then he would be admitted to a lot of these schools. But he's getting these rejections now or 2 weeks ago in the middle of all of this. It's not like they were considering him 5 minutes ago. They were considering him 4 months ago. They probably don't even remember seeing his application because places like UCLA get tens of thousands of applications every year. So in any case, Laura Ingraham tweets out this story, and we covered it pretty straight. It was pretty objective coverage, or at least it wasn't politically charged. And Laura tweeted this out. She tweeted, David Hogg rejected by 4 colleges to which he applied and whines about it, dinged by UCLA with a 4.1 GPA, totally predictable given acceptance rates. Hey, I don't think that this is particularly awful. Anything that Laura says here is particularly awful. Do I think that it's fair to say that he's whining about it? I think it's maybe half fair or a quarter fair. I don't totally agree with Laura's take on David Hogg's comments here, but the way David Hogg responds is what's really important here. So David Hogg responds to this relatively mild critique by saying that they should boycott Laura Ingraham. Right? So he starts immediately, like within minutes, tweeting out Laura Ingram's advertisers and saying that all these places should drop Laura Ingraham. Why? For the great sin of having suggested that he whined about not getting into college. Okay, she didn't say anything racist. She didn't say anything sexist. She didn't say David Hogg is a piece of crap. She didn't insult him personally. Like really, she was insulting his comments, right? The things that he said. He is part of the public discourse. And this is demonstrative of exactly how this game is being played now by the left. They've trot out a bunch of kids. The kids have every right to speak. Again, for the 1,000th time, the kids have every right to speak. They trot out a bunch of kids. And then if you disagree with the kids, they suggest you are attacking the kids personally. And then based on that, they say you shouldn't be on the air. And this is what David Hogg is now doing. Okay, David Hogg does not have, any sort of moral impetus to call for a full boycott of Laura Ingraham based on that tweet. She got ratioed pretty hard on Twitter, meaning that more people replied to her tweet than actually retweeted it, which is very often taken on Twitter as a sign of it was a bad tweet or something. Okay, that's fine, but boycotts? Really? And if we're really at the point in this country where you say something that's even mildly controversial and there are calls for boycotts, then we're not going to have a common culture anymore. We really aren't. Because I promise you, the right is just as capable of this as the left. The right has stayed away from it. In fact, I used to run an organization called Truth Revolt. It was a branch of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. And when I ran Truth Revolt, one of our goals was to provide a mutually assured destruction. The idea was if the left was going to use boycott tactics in order to knock conservatives off the air, then we would use boycott tactics to knock leftists off the air. And then everybody would learn that boycott tactics are bad. That boycott tactics end up knocking voices off the air or destroying the profit margins for shows that are controversial. I think David Hogg should be able to speak out however he wants. I don't think that advertisers should be boycotted for praising David Hogg. I don't think any of those things. But there's this attempt to use market forces to club people with whom you politically disagree, not because they're racist or brutal or horrible, but just because you disagree. And if that becomes our politics, the entire market basis for political discourse in the country goes away, and that is going to have a significant weakening impact on the kind of voices that you're allowed to hear. And meanwhile, the media continues to portray David Hogg as some sort of apolitical, above-the-fray figure. He's been anything but apolitical. He's been anything but above the fray. So do I think that Laura's tweet was completely correct? No. Do I think it's boycott-worthy? You got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. And the Washington Post, I'm on their email list, and the Washington Post emailed this out as their lead today. Legitimately, as their lead. They emailed out the Laura Ingraham story. That this was some sort of brutal, terrible thing that had just happened, that Laura Ingraham is deserving of all of this. It's just silliness. But again, it's not particularly shocking because they've done this against virtually every major talk show host. Speaking of stupidity in the media, again, just quick final note on the Laura Ingraham boycott tactic here. The same media that's promoting that tactic is vulnerable to that tactic should they step out of line in any particular way. You're living in a very dangerous era for the future of the media when audiences are being pushed to boycott particular outlets because of the viewpoints of those outlets. Barring full-on Nazis or full-on racists, I think that we all ought to take a step back and just say, listen, people ought to be able to watch what they want to watch. You should be able to, even if you want to watch Nazi crap, you should be able to watch it. I just won't patronize your advertisers. But Laura Ingraham is not a Nazi, and the attempt to lump all political speech into one bag that I don't like it, therefore it's Nazi-esque, is really quite ridiculous. Okay, speaking of quite ridiculous, I just had to comment on this Jezebel tweet. So Jezebel is a feminist outlet, and a couple of days ago, there was a tweet that came out from Planned Parenthood in some podunk town in which Planned Parenthood tweeted, we need a Disney princess who is transgender. We need a Disney princess who has had an abortion. Okay, and I said, well, what we really need is a Disney princess who uses her royal authority to defund Planned Parenthood. Let's start with that. But Jezebel has to defend that, of course, because we need to indoctrinate children about abortion and transgenderism and same-sex marriage. We need a Disney princess who's a lesbian. Right? This is the new push, by the way, for Ilsa in Frozen, is that in the sequel, they should give Ilsa a girlfriend. Because there's nothing better than teaching 3-year-old children who like the movie Frozen because they like Olaf that lesbianism is on equal moral par and societal value with heterosexuality. Yeah, it's perfect because kids at 3 should know all about sex. That's really important. So Jezebel tweeted something out that was even stupider yesterday. They tweeted out statistically at least 2 Disney princesses have had abortions. Okay, and the reason that Jezebel says this, of course, is because they say that statistically speaking, a certain percentage of people in the United States, certain percentage of women have had abortions. And that means that a certain percentage of Disney princesses, by extension, must have had abortions. Here's what the piece says. They said, we need many kinds of Disney princesses, according to an extremely fun meme whooshing around the net. We need a Disney princess who joules. I don't even know what that is. We need a Disney princess who is falling asleep, calling a cab, having a smoke, taking a drag. We need a Disney princess with chronic UTIs. We also, according to Planned Parenthood affiliate, need a Disney princess who has gotten an abortion. Statistically, like 2.5 already have. Right, so then they say, according to the Guttmacher Institute, 23.7% of women in the United States will have had an abortion by age 45. According to the official Disney Princess website, there are 11 official Disney princesses: Belle, Rapunzel, Ariel, Tiana, Snow White, Cinderella, Aurora, Merida, Pocahontas, Jasmine, and Mulan. That means statistically around 2.5 of these strong women have gotten abortions and aren't telling you about it because of a national culture of shame and misogyny. Let me just say something to Planned Parenthood and Jezebel. You people are so unbelievably dumb. This is not how statistics work. Okay, if 23.7% of women in the United States will have had an abortion by age 45, a number that I think is probably very high, but let's say that that's true. If that number is true, that still would not suggest that Disney princesses, were they real people and not fictional characters, would have had abortions. Okay, first of all, they're fake. I know I have to keep emphasizing this for folks on the left. Certain things are real. Certain things are pretend. Certain things that are pretend have certain cultural significance. It's why we talked about Roseanne, because people were saying the cultural significance of Roseanne is something. It's why we talked about Black Panther. People saying Black Panther had cultural significance. Okay, fair enough. But you want to argue that Disney princesses have had abortions. Disney princesses don't exist in real life. They're not real people. And even if they did exist in real life, 2.5 of them, two of them would not have had abortions. Because statistically speaking, Disney princesses are incredibly wealthy. Many of them lived hundreds of years ago in a different universe. So that's like saying that 23.7% of women in the U.S. will have had an abortion. That means that in our office, there are probably 10 women who work in our office, in this office. That means that 2 of them have had an abortion. That's not how statistics work, gang. That's like saying, it is the equivalent of saying that every family in America has an average of 2.4 children. That means that every family in America has 2 whole children and a 0.4 of a child.